There are some positive things in here on steel, aluminium, and cars, for example, and there is some signs that there is going to be more. So there's an indication that there's going to be more work done on mutual recognition, which I take to be standards as well as qualifications. But there isn't much else. And we are still in a worse position than we were at the start of the year. So it's good news for certain sectors, but we still need to pursue a proper full fat free trade agreement with the US. That's what we want. That's what people like myself who voted to leave the EU wanted us to be able to do with other nations.
Yeah, and look, let's put this in context. And domestically, both the Conservatives and, of course, the government had a dreadful set of elections last week. I think everyone would admit that from both parties, really. But actually, internationally, with a deal on CPTPP, Asia Pacific, plus a UK-India deal, plus being at the front of the queue to try and get some form of deal with the United States. Actually, the government's not doing a bad front on the trade front, delivering some of those promises that were offered to constituents and the British population on Brexit. I mean, he gets a few ticks, doesn't he, Penny?
Well, look, I've given credit where credit is due on the diplomatic front, but we really do want to see some substance behind these deals. Ultimately, this is about growth and giving our citizens more disposable income. If we match the growth levels in the US, for example, people would be many, many £1,000s better off every single year. This is what this is about. It's about growing high wage jobs as well as holding down the cost of living. And we're not there yet. There's nothing in this agreement, for example, for the film and television sector or pharmaceuticals or defence sector. And we also, I think, need to pursue the work that was started under the last government at state level in the US as well. That's where a lot of the regulation sits. And if we can do more work on mutual recognition, we can remove those barriers to trade, open up our markets really meaningfully to each other, including on agriculture. And there is some benefits for the UK, quite considerable benefits of doing that. I know, having spoken to many agricultural commissioners in the US. So come on, let's bank this. It's good for those sectors that really were in great difficulty with some of the announcements Trump had made. But let's push on for something that we know is going to really deliver for both our citizens.
Penny, as you say, is still a cloud hanging over some areas from pharmaceuticals to film. And if I could just focus on pharmaceuticals for a moment, because there is a discussion that there's preferential treatment here if there are going to be future tariffs. But that said, I think the Americans angling for more US health providers to come into the UK health system. Where are the negotiating points here, as you see it, for Big Pharma and for the healthcare system?
Look, I think one of the biggest prizes that sits in all of this is about getting drugs to market faster. And this is, for me, ultimately about keeping costs down in healthcare, but it's also about delivering the best care and the best options for patients. And we have very strict regimes in the UK before a drug can go to market, the same in the US, and many other countries have those high standards as well. So I think there's a huge benefit to having discussions between those nations about how we actually speed up this process. The faster, when we saw it during the pandemic, we saw it in many circumstances, the faster we can get safe drugs to patients, the better for those patients.
Penny, I want to take you to the broader geopolitical landscape, because we are counting down to Switzerland over the weekend and whether the US and China can make progress on a discussion on trade as well. But the reality is that a lot of countries are now reworking and rethinking what type of relationship they want with China versus backtracking and trying to de-risk those supply chains. So thinking, well, maybe the Chinese market is actually a deep market we still want to tap, given how our relationship with the United States has played out. In that vein, as the UK extracted not much in the way from this trade agreement with the US, how should they be thinking about the relationship with China from here?
Look, I think what business wants is some stability and some, as much as it can, some certainty. I mean, one worrying thing about this this agreement with the U.S. is that there isn't details about how it might be terminated. That's still being negotiated. So I think what business wants is when people have taken a decision, there's some certainty over its longevity so that they can make the necessary decisions they need to on their supply chains and their production lines. I still think that the United States is a reliable partner, and certainly people who have done business in China know the pitfalls of doing that. But we are in a very difficult moment now with this trade war that is building. And I think that we have to recognize that business can cope with many situations, but it can't cope with every situation it might be presented with. We've got to give our businesses some certainty and enable them to make good decisions to get our economies firing again.